What's up, guys? Raziel here. I know it's been a while, but as you know, I don't do clickbait videos. So, in this video, I want to cover something that we had a long discussion about in a couple of my streams recently about the MMORPG genre. What's gone wrong with it? Does it even exist anymore? And if it does, how come it's gotten so stale? So, without further ado, let's do the drop and let's get into it. Forewarning, this is more of a podcasty video, so more for your ears than your eyes, but I will put eye candy on the screen. Let's go.
I am Raziel.
So, to start this video out, I need to go back a bit to some of my older videos because I've touched on this topic a handful of times in the past, but I think it's best now that my view has shifted a little bit to congregate my thoughts into a single video and put it all together, because there's one thing I said in my other videos about how a lot of times we confuse nostalgia for good quality. We confuse, you can never re-experience the same feeling you had with your first MMO ever again. And that's something that I have now, after thinking about it and having these discussions on my streams about it, is not entirely true. So let me expand on that. You see, back my first MMO, if you've been on my channel a while, this kind of be a refresher, was Asheron's Call back in 1999. I did dabble a little bit on my uncle's account with Ultima Online and that sort of thing. But of course MUDs, multi-user dimensions, all text-based MMOs way back in the day, mid-90s. But Asheron's Call, I've never felt something like that. It was the first experience I had where you walk into this huge open world and you're just going around and you just get lost in it. It's one of the most amazing feelings I ever felt, and it's what addicted me and hooked me to the MMORPG genre right from the fucking start. But as I reflect back on some of the MMOs I played after, because I've said multiple times that you never experience that again, and this is where I realized that previous statement I had made is 100% false. When I played Dark Age of Camelot for the first time, which I played after Asheron's Call, I had the same feeling the first time stepping into the world, just awe, wonderment, amazement, and that sense of exploration and danger was there. Shadowbane, I felt the same way. Even vanilla World of Warcraft in 2004, I felt just as much of a hook. In fact, maybe even more so with WoW, because that's the game I played longer than any other MMO ever. So what changed? Well, as we're going to talk about here, the MMO as I knew them, as a lot of people around my age knew them, doesn't exist anymore. The only thing even remotely close, and that's, again, this is very much speculation at this point, is going to be Ashes of Creation. Now, the alpha for that, in case you didn't know, is delayed, so get fucking wrecked. Let's go cry in the corner. But again, like what I've always wanted really doesn't exist anymore, and what the MMORPG genre doesn't exist anymore. And I'll give you a perfect example. Take a step back and look. MMOs now, like Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft current, Bless Online, pretty much any MMO that has come out in the last 10-15 years is no different from games like Destiny 2, The Division 2, any other game that has online functionality. And we're going to go into detail about that here, because if you look, almost every game has some form of online play these days. For consoles, for PC, even handheld systems, it's pretty rare to run into a game that doesn't have any kind of online functionality. I mean, shit, even the Dark Souls games do that kind of thing where you play with other people and go in other people's worlds, right? So the things that made MMO their own unique genre are now things that almost every game has, because 90% of games have multiplayer online features and functionality. So, but that's just a small part. The part that other games stole from the MMO idea is fine, because online play in all forms can be quite entertaining, quite fun, and can make a gaming experience that much sweeter. But here's the rub, bitch. MMOs lost the other things that separated them from just a game you can interact with other people with online or play with your buddies, in a 3, 4, 6-man composition. The things that made MMOs true MMOs are long gone. Now let's talk about that. What are those things that have been replaced with something else? And what replaced them? Let's take a look. So let's look further on what has changed, what was taken away, and what was it replaced with. And you might want to crank up that fucking chemotherapy, because a lot of this stuff is cancer. When you finally take a step back and see what's become of some of the most important aspects of this genre, and why the genre, as I said in the title of the video, is stale at this point, practically completely different. It's changed into something else. So one of the first things that jumped out at me with Assurance Call, Dark Age Camelot, those old MMOs, Vanilla World of Warcraft, even into BC to some sense, and Wrath of the Lich King, was a sense of danger in the world and adventure. So a lot of people say, this isn't a Tinder profile where, some thoughts talking about, I like to go on adventures. I mean, what the hell does that even mean? Anyway, back to MMORPGs. Adventure in an MMORPG was, there were no rails. There was no real, you might talk to an NPC here or there and they'll shove you in a certain direction or give you a hint, but you were not supposed to do that. There was no overarching storyline. You were absolutely pigeonholed and forced into following. You went your own way. The games similar to this, look at open world games like Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls series, the Fallout series. But even then, you're still following one narrative. You can choose to go off that path and fuck around and do whatever you want. But in the old MMOs, there was no overarching narrative. You just went and explored, dropped in a world, and you had to go out and do things. And that's the thing, is that's what ultimately created the separation between theme park and sandbox MMOs, because MMOs originally didn't have that separation. All MMOs were sandbox. That's just how they were. And the world had a sense of danger about it, because even from the very starting zone all the way up to the most dangerous areas in the game, you could get your ass kicked, and the punishment for death or going to a bad place unprepared were extremely high. Which, enhances that sense of danger, and at the same time, the sense of adventure. And also goes into my next point. When you have a world that's dangerous and you're encouraged to adventure and to go around and you're not on rails, it created an environment that encouraged social interaction, not forced interaction through instances or raids or certain maps set with specific rules. It forced you to interact with other players, to make friends. As you would PvP, you would make enemies, but you needed people to help you, because I don't care how good of a player you were, at some point you were going to die in a really bad place, and you needed someone to help you get your body back and your stuff back, or you needed someone to help you get revenge on a higher level player that was pushing your shit in on a regular basis. So social interaction happened organically that way, because the world encouraged it. And going further, speaking of instances, as we were talking, as I just mentioned, there were no instances in Dark Age of Camelot, in Assurance Call, in Vanilla WoW was the first time we saw something like that, and it was when theme parks and that whole idea was new. But in the old games, you'd go into a dungeon, and if there are other people in there farming, camping, doing whatever, that's what it was. You would find them. There were dungeons and hidden places spread all over the place, and you didn't get your own little personalized single-player-esque zone to just go to at any point. Even in the player housing was an instance in that sense. In a lot of those games, you would go to your house, and anybody else could walk up and find your house and go in, and if purchase it away from you if you didn't pay your fees on it or whatever. So instances have really done, a number on setting people apart. And the fact that this is even a thing now, and some people use the excuse, oh, it's easier on the servers to have instances, is bullshit, because MMOs like EverQuest, Assurance Call, back in the 90s, didn't have server issues with not having instant servers. And that brings me to my next point. What takes away danger, takes away adventure, takes away social interaction is not only instances, which is what has replaced a lot of that stuff, but where the game now starts at level cap and not at level 1 where you start. Everyone's rushing to end game. So even if you have a narrative on rails, a lot of people, not all, burn through it, just click through it, don't read anything, don't do anything, because they just want to get to the end game, because that's when the game actually fucking starts for most people. That's where you actually get to do the content that makes your character stronger. Leveling up these days in MMORPGs, for the most part, doesn't feel like it's making your character any stronger. It doesn't feel like you're progressing in much of a meaningful way. And it just gets destroyed by the fact that end game is even a thing. End game should be the whole game. That's how it was back in the day. And I know I may be coming off and sound like an old man right here, just sitting here rambling on about back in my day we did it this way, and maybe I am, but I'm gonna talk about this shit anyway, because when you look at the world as a whole, the MMO worlds of today, I mean, that's no different, like I said, than games like Destiny 2, looter shooters that are out, any other game where you get with a group of a maximum of like 6 people to 10 people at most, and you're limited in an instanced server. Nothing organic can really take place there, because everyone is just racing to what is the top light level or the top item level or the top max level. Back in like Assurance Call, EverQuest, like it took people years to get to level cap, and you could still progress your character after level cap. Level cap back then was not, when the game started, it was pretty much just an indicator of how much experience in the game you had. Nothing more. There were very few places that said, yo, you can't go here because you're not this level. You could still go there, and if you weren't the right level, you just get your ass kicked. But a lot of that has gone away. Another thing that's gone away is server name and accountability. Your own reputation in the game world. Used to be, you could make it whatever you wanted it. But in this day and age, now, you could be people's enemies. You could be people's friends. You're supposed to be the hero or the enemy to the other players, not to the NPCs in the fucking game. And again, that goes back to people being on rails, people being forced to play a certain role in the storyline that the developer chooses you should be in. We had single player games for that shit. These are supposed to be our characters, our reflections of how we view ourselves projected into a game world. I didn't look at games like Final Fantasy 6, 4, Chrono Trigger, Zelda, any single player game, Legacy of Kain series. I never projected myself into that game because I was it was like reading a book or watching somebody else's story through their eyes. But your character as an MMO, the big draw at the beginning when MMOs were the new genre, was you were that person. You were putting yourself in this world to experience everything around and to interact with the other players, not so much the NPCs in the game. And now in our current climate of paid character name changes, paid character transfers, level skips, level potions, class trials, things like that, there is no accountability. If you're an asshole to somebody, you can just pay $10 and change your name, and they'll never know it was you, or transfer to a different server. No big deal. Which brings me back to my earlier point: when you have no reputation in the game and it doesn't matter anymore, it gives you less things to strive for. It gives you less reasons to be pleasant. It gives you less reasons to be kind of be an asshole if that's how you view your character and that's how you are. Because back then the world was the protagonist of the game, not you. And in this day and age, in every MMO that's currently out, you're the protagonist and you have no say in the matter. Another thing that I've noticed, and this is not just for MMOs, it's any game with online functionality, is old content is trivialized and made irrelevant very, very quickly. any place that was in a previous expansion is dead after the new one comes out, because the world no longer matters. That's what happens when the world is no longer the protagonist. They just throw everybody in one small area, one map, and then until the next map comes out, and then that one's abandoned. And I think that's a huge problem. And it's been happening even since like Burning Crusade. EverQuest did that. Not to the degree WoW has done it, but when you trivialize your old content, your old world, you show that it doesn't matter. And I think that's something that's become a very, very huge problem, is the way expansions are designed and released in what is now considered the MMORPG genre. Now, the only time anyone ever goes back to something that's old is to get something cosmetic. And now that we're talking about cosmetics, this leads perfectly into my next point. Back in the old days of MMOs, Dark Age Camelot, Assurance Call, EverQuest, early WoW, cosmetics were linked to power. The coolest shit in the game was the most powerful shit in the game in 90% of cases. People wanted that to show their character's progress, to show their power, and now cosmetics for the most part have become easy to get, farmable, purchasable. You know, you can just buy them in some kind of cash shop. And that disincentivizes so much of the MMORPG genre to the point where it's no different than, you know, some game where you can get some shitty DLC that you buy, you know, like Call of Duty or some shit, and spend your coins and gamble and get something cool that you actually didn't earn. You should... The fact that they removed power from the coolest looking items in the game for most MMORPGs is really, really disappointing, and I think it has caused quite a few problems. Like I've told this story before. I remember the first time I saw someone in the Warrior Tier 1 set in World of Warcraft back in 2005. That's what got me into raiding. He looked so cool, and then I looked at his gear and it was so strong compared to what I had that I wanted to push myself to be as good as him, you know, and to have the server rep that character had. It was a big fucking deal, you know. And I know it might sound like, you know, high school semantics here, but it's 100% true that inspires people. Being liked and being looked up to by other players in a game because of your hard work, being recognized, doing the hard content to get that thing is very incentivizing, and that's all been taken away. Which, speaking of these cosmetics, brings me to my next big point, which ties back into what we were talking about with endgame and creating environments for social interaction and creating a character reputation. Is uniqueness in character and class design has given way to homogenization, because most things in the game, in most MMOs now, have been sacrificed at the altar of accessibility. Back in the old games, you could gimp your character, you could fuck up, you could make your character trash by the way you spec'd him, and the cost of fixing that mistake was very high. Like in WoW, it was, you know, high gold costs. In Asura's Call, it was a huge long quest you had to do, and you had to do a lot of work, get a lot of experience to untrain certain skills and retrain new ones. So there was weight and heft to the decisions you made. And people talk about, you know, in the current iteration of World of Warcraft Shadowlands, how, you know, they hate that the weight of the Covenant system. And my biggest problem with the Covenant system isn't its weight. It's the fact that the weight doesn't even matter, because once this expansion's over, it's irrelevant. It doesn't fucking matter, right? You should be allowed to make mistakes in games. That adds to the adventure, that adds to the danger, and it makes you learn and become better. But developers in this day and age are trying to control too much of the player experience, the social interaction with other players. They don't want any player to have any kind of bad experience ever, especially if it's caused by another player, which is why now they separate PvP, you know, and WoW through war mode, and can't really gank people anymore unless they flag themselves to be ganked. And you know, can do almost any piece of content in the game without interacting in chat at all with anyone ever if you don't really want to in most MMORPGs, because they have what I like to call not only the developers, but a lot of the players in this day and age, because of our society, have SSS. And you may say, well, Raz, what the hell is SSS? Sensitive Snowflake Syndrome. You're a big fat pussy, essentially, and you need to grow the fuck up and understand that part of what makes games fun, and if you're an old man like me, or an old woman, and you can look back and remember those times in those old games, some of the funnest times are when you were frustrated or getting ganked, and then you got your crew together, or you were dying over and over in a dangerous part of the game and wanted to go back and have to get your shit back. Those were some of the best memories, but now everything's just handed to everybody because, God forbid, you have a single negative experience while you're playing the game. What they don't realize is when they do that, the entire experience of the game is negative because it's so fucking dull as dishwater, boring as shit, and you just, makes you want to pull your hair out, when you're just trying to find things to do. But overall, the game industry doesn't really have the MMO genre anymore. Really ask yourself, what separates, things, MMOs of today from games like Destiny 2, games like Division 2, Division 1, Call of Duty, almost any game that has online functionality. And the differences are very, very small because all the things that made an MMO are cut out, and a lot of things that just the multiplayer aspect of an MMO are put into almost every other game type out there. Which brings me to my final point that I've brought this out, is people say, yeah, well, the adventure and the danger and the excitement and the exploration and all that stuff can't really exist anymore because of data mining. And I used to think the same thing, but that since playing Final Fantasy XIV, you have to come to understand that's not true. Nothing is data mined from Final Fantasy XIV's patches or expansions. They do a real good job of keeping a lid on it, because they don't do public beta tests. They don't do public raid tests. They don't release content until it's finished, and they guard it really, really close to the chest. And so it still can be done because, don't get me wrong, Square Enix is a shit AAA company these days too. I mean, just look at Final Fantasy VII Remake. But I digress. They do a really good job of hiding what they have in store by paying in-house people to test their games, as opposed to the method most companies go, AAA or not, in making you pay to test their game, which that in and of itself is so much cancer. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much the video. I know this is more of a talking head video, and it's been a while since more of a podcast video, I should say. It's been a while since I've been making some videos, and again, it's because I'm never going to make a video that's clickbait. I'm going to make videos when I talk about something I'm passionate about and something that I want to discuss with you. So I'm interested in your thoughts, comments, opinions down below, regardless of what MMO you play, or if you're not playing any right now. I'm not saying all of these games are bad. What I'm saying is they're not really MMOs, not like MMOs were. The genre of the MMORPG doesn't really exist anymore. And to be honest, it probably won't ever exist again. The closest thing, as I said, is Ashes of Creation, and that's if they pull off everything they say they're going to pull off, which is very, very doubtful. So I'm curious to know your opinions and thoughts, because we've been having these discussions on my streams, which, by the way, Twitch link up above, so you know where to come find me. I stream every at least two times a week. Tuesday's a guarantee. I'm still working on the other day. Sometimes it's Sunday night, sometimes it's Monday, sometimes it's Wednesday. It's very rarely any other day than Sunday, Monday, or Wednesday on the other day, because I work weekends. But guys, thanks so much for the support I've gotten on the stream lately. Feel free to drop in if you're not a regular and just come talk some shit. We're pretty toxic over there, and it's a good time. If not, no worries. I'm interested in your opinion. Leave it down below. And if you like the video, please like the video. It helps me out a lot. If not, that's fine. Leave a thumbs down. You can go fuck yourself. And as always, my friends, keep it real.